I texted drop dead to Chicago's Mafia boss. The next morning, he sat across from me and smiled. Chapter 1, Drop Dead. The text was supposed to go to Marcus. I know that sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, but at the time it felt like the only honest thing I'd done in 3 months. Marcus had been cheating on me for 6 weeks. I found out via a photo on his lock screen while he was in the shower. A photo of him kissing some guy in a bar. The same bar where we'd had our first date. So I did what any rational 24-year-old coffee shop supervisor with a shattered ego and a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey would do. I texted him. Drop dead. 2 words. No emoji. No period. Just pure, unfiltered rage. Except I didn't text Marcus. I texted a number 1 digit off. A number I didn't know. A number belonging to the last man in Chicago you ever want to tell to drop dead. The reply came 3 minutes later. Who the hell is this? I laughed, bitter and wet-eyed. Marcus was pretending he didn't recognize my number. Classic. You know exactly who. Drop dead, Marcus, ***. Then I blocked the number, threw my phone across the couch, and drank myself into a numb, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I walked into Grindhouse Coffee at 6:47 a.m., hungover and hollow, and started setting up the espresso machine. The cafe was empty except for a few early regulars. I was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up. Be with you in a sec. When I finally did look up, the first thing I noticed was the suit. Black, tailored, expensive enough to pay my rent for a year. The second thing I noticed was the man wearing it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of cold steel. He moved like a predator, calm, deliberate, utterly certain that every person in the room would get out of his way. He sat directly across from me at the counter. Folded his hands. And smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't a cruel smile, either. It was the smile of a man who had just caught something small and interesting in a trap. Noah Callahan, he said. My blood turned to ice. Do I know you? Not yet. He pulled out a phone, my phone number glowing on the screen, my text displayed beneath it. Drop dead, Marcus. My stomach dropped through the floor. You texted me this at 11:42 last night, he said, voice smooth as polished wood. Then you blocked me. That was rude. You're not Marcus. I'm aware. He leaned forward. My name is Dante Moretti. And for the record, no one has ever told me to drop dead and live to repeat it. The air left my lungs. I knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Dante Moretti was the head of the Moretti family, Mafia, organized crime, the whole terrifying package. He ran half the city's underground and owned the other half through shell companies. He was 31, single, and, according to every gossip blog, absolutely lethal. And I had told him to drop dead. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. That wasn't meant for you. Clearly. His smile widened. But here we are. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep my hands from shaking. Are you going to kill me? He tilted his head, considering. I was going to. Last night, I had a very detailed plan. But then I saw your photo on the cafe's website. And I thought, he's pretty. He's reckless. He's exactly what I need. I blinked. What? Relax, Noah. Dante Moretti reached across the counter and took my wrist. His fingers were warm, strong, and utterly unbreakable. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be breathing. I'm here to make you an offer. I don't want anything to do with the Mafia. Too late. His thumb pressed against the inside of my wrist, right over my pulse. You already made contact. Now you get to choose what happens next. I tried to pull away. His grip tightened, just enough to make me stop. Sit down, he said. I was already standing. That's how scared I was. I'm not going to hurt you, Noah. He released my wrist slowly, like he was teaching a wild animal to trust him. I need a boyfriend for 6 weeks. You're going to be him. The word hit me like a bucket of ice water. Excuse me? My family's annual gala is in 6 weeks. The elders have decided I need to present a stable, committed partner or they'll question my judgment. A distraction I can't afford. He said it like he was discussing the weather. You're young, attractive, and you have absolutely no ties to my world. You're perfect. I'm not doing it. You told me to drop dead, he said, and there was that smile again. Consider this your debt. 6 weeks. Pretend to be mine. After the gala, you walk away with your life and a very generous check. I stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, Noah. He stood, and suddenly he was very close, towering over me, his eyes burning into mine. Say yes, and I'll protect you. Say no, and I'll walk out that door. But I won't forget the text. And neither will the people who work for me. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. That's a threat. No, he said, leaning down until his lips were inches from my ear. That's a choice. Choose wisely. He stepped back. The cafe was still quiet, but it felt like the whole world had shifted. I should have said no. I should have run. But then I thought about Marcus, about my empty apartment, about the fact that for the first time in months, someone was looking at me like I actually mattered. Even if it was for all the wrong reasons. Fine, I whispered. 6 weeks. Dante Moretti smiled, this time, it reached his eyes. Good boy. ## Chapter 2, The Proposition. Dante didn't leave me alone after that. He waited at the counter while I finished my shift, sipping black coffee like he had nowhere else to be. Every time I glanced at him, he was already watching me, his expression unreadable. At noon, my replacement arrived. I untied my apron and grabbed my bag, and Dante stood, buttoning his jacket. We're leaving, he said. I have things to do. You have a new life to rehearse. He walked to the door and held it open. After you. I wanted to argue, but the memory of his fingers on my wrist was still fresh. So I stepped outside, and a black SUV pulled up to the curb. A man in a dark suit got out and opened the back door. This is Enzo, Dante said, sliding in beside me. He's my second in command. He'll be around. Enzo was older, late 40s, with a scar across his jaw and kind eyes that didn't match the rest of him. He nodded at me. Nice to meet you, Noah. Wish I could say the same. Enzo laughed, a real laugh, surprising me. Dante ignored us. He pulled out his phone and started typing. The SUV moved smoothly through Chicago traffic, and I watched the city blur past, trying to convince myself this wasn't actually happening. Where are we going? I asked. My apartment. Why? He looked up, eyebrow raised. Because you're moving in. I nearly choked. I'm sorry, what? If we're going to convince anyone we're together, we need to know each other. Habits, routines, how we take our coffee. He paused. How we touch. The last part hung in the air, thick and dangerous. I'm not sleeping with you, I said flatly. I didn't ask you to. His gaze dropped to my mouth for a fraction of a second. But we'll need to be comfortable with each other. And that means proximity. I crossed my arms. This is insane. Yes, he agreed. But you agreed to it. The apartment building was in the Gold Coast, all glass and steel and doormen who knew Dante by name. His penthouse took up the entire top floor. The elevator opened directly into a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It was cold and beautiful and terrifyingly clean. Your room is the second door on the left, Dante said, shrugging off his jacket. Enzo will bring your things from your apartment. Make a list of anything you need. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling like a stray dog in a museum. I can't just leave my life. You can, and you will. He walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. For the next 6 weeks, your life is mine. I hated the way he said that. Hated it even more because something in my chest tightened. What about my job? You'll take a leave of absence. I'll handle it. Of course you will. I sank onto the edge of a white leather sofa. So what's the story? How did we meet? Dante crossed the room and sat across from me, close enough that our knees almost touched. We met 3 months ago. You served me coffee. I kept coming back. You didn't know who I was. I like that. That's not a story, that's a fantasy. He smiled. Exactly. People believe fantasies. I studied him. In the daylight, he looked less like a monster and more like a man, sharp cheekbones, a slight shadow of stubble, full lips that probably smiled more than I wanted to admit. His hands were large, his knuckles lightly scarred. Those hands had hurt people. They had maybe killed people. And yet, I couldn't stop staring at them. You're staring, Dante said. I looked away. I'm processing. Take your time. He leaned back. But while you do, let me be clear, in public, you will hold my hand. You will let me touch you. You will look at me like you're in love with me. Do you understand? My face heated. I'm not an actor. Then learn. He stood and crossed to the windows. The gala is 6 weeks away. By then, I need the entire Moretti family to believe I've fallen for a coffee boy. If they don't, we both have a problem. I swallowed. What kind of problem? He turned, the light behind him making him look like something out of a noir film. The kind that ends with bullets. ## Chapter 3, Moving In. Enzo brought my things within 2 hours. I barely had time to explore the apartment, 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine, and a wine fridge larger than my old closet. My room was sleek and impersonal, with gray sheets and blackout curtains. When Enzo arrived, he handed me my duffel bag in a cardboard box. Your neighbor said you owed her $15 for pizza. Mrs. Kowalski. Of course she did. I took the box. Thanks. Enzo nodded. Dante's in his study. He wants you to join him for dinner at 7. Don't be late. Then he left, and I was alone in a Mafia boss's apartment, holding my entire life in 2 bags. I spent the next hour unpacking. Then I showered, changed into jeans and a faded t-shirt, and wandered out into the living room. The sun was setting over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful. I hated that it was beautiful. At exactly 7, Dante emerged from the hallway. He'd changed into dark slacks and a fitted black sweater. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered. He looked even more dangerous without the suit, more human. You're on time, he said. I'm not an idiot. He smirked. Come. We'll eat. Dinner was already set on the dining table, pasta, salad, bread, wine. I didn't ask who had made it. I just sat down and tried not to feel like I was dining with a wolf. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Dante set down his fork. Tell me about Marcus. I tensed. Why? Because he's the reason you texted me. I want to know who I'm competing with. You're not competing with anyone. I stabbed a piece of pasta. He cheated. I found out. I was angry. The end. Dante watched me with those unreadable eyes. You loved him. I thought I did. I looked up. But love doesn't mean much when the person you're with is kissing someone else in the same bar where you first met. A muscle in Dante's jaw twitched. He's an idiot. Thanks. I mean it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. If I had someone like you, I wouldn't let him go. My heart stumbled. I searched his face for the lie, but there wasn't one. That was somehow worse. You don't know me, I said quietly. Not yet. He reached across the table, and for the second time that day, his fingers closed around my wrist. His thumb traced a slow circle over my pulse point. But I'm a quick study. I pulled my hand back. What are you doing? Getting comfortable. He sat back, but his eyes stayed on me. You flinched. We can't have that. I didn't flinch. Your pulse spiked. He smiled. I felt it. I stood abruptly, carrying my plate to the sink. You can't just touch me whenever you want. Actually, he said, appearing beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, that's exactly what a boyfriend would do. He took the plate from my hands and set it in the sink. Then he turned me around, his hands settling on my waist, light but firm. Relax, Noah, he murmured. This isn't a seduction. It's a rehearsal. I looked up at him, my heart hammering. Then why does it feel like one? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or hunger. His fingers tightened on my waist. Because, he said, you're paying attention. He let me go and stepped back. The loss of heat was immediate. Tomorrow, we start training, he said, walking away. Get some rest. You'll need it. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, wondering how the hell I was supposed to survive 6 weeks of this. Chapter 4, Rehearsal. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. I dragged myself out of bed, pulled on a hoodie, and found Dante standing at the stove, flipping pancakes. He glanced over his shoulder. You're awake. I don't remember agreeing to a full-service breakfast. You didn't. He slid a pancake onto a plate and handed it to me. Eat. We have a long day. I sat at the island and watched him cook. He moved with the same precision he used for everything else, each movement deliberate, efficient. It was unsettling. What's on the agenda? I asked. First, we get you fitted for a suit. Then we go over the guest list. Then we practice. Practice what? He set down the spatula and turned to face me. Dancing. Conversation. How to stand next to each other without looking like strangers. I snorted. You really think dancing is going to convince your family we're together? No, he said. But it will teach you to trust me. An hour later, we were in the back of the SUV, heading to a tailor in the West Loop. The shop was small and old-fashioned, with rolls of fabric stacked to the ceiling and a tiny Italian man who greeted Dante like a son. Dante. You need a new suit? Not for me, Paolo. For him. Dante gestured to me. He has a gala in 6 weeks. Paolo looked me up and down. Skinny. But good shoulders. We can work with that. I was measured, poked, and prodded for 20 minutes. Dante sat in a leather chair nearby, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. When Paolo disappeared to check fabric, Dante stood and walked toward me. He stopped just behind me, so close I could feel the heat of his body. You're tense, he said. I'm being measured for a suit by a man who probably has bodies in his basement. Forgive me for being tense. He laughed, a low, warm sound that caught me off guard. Paolo's harmless. Mostly. His hand came up to rest on my shoulder. His thumb brushed the side of my neck, just above the collar of my hoodie. What are you doing? I asked, my voice rough. Shoo, his lips were near my ear now. There's a mirror. Look. I looked. In the mirror, we looked like something out of a magazine, Dante behind me, his hand on my shoulder, his face close to mine. It was intimate. Too intimate. This is how we stand at the gala, he murmured. Close. But not too close. You lean into me. I hold you steady. Like we can't help it. I swallowed. You're very good at this. I've had practice. His fingers squeezed my shoulder once. But with you, it's easier. Why? He met my eyes in the mirror. Because I'm not pretending as much as I thought I would be. Before I could respond, Paolo came back, and Dante stepped away, leaving me cold and confused. Chapter 5, The Gala. The next 6 weeks blurred into a strange, charged routine. I learned how to walk beside Dante without stumbling. How to laugh at his jokes. How to let him touch me without flinching. But the strangest part was how natural it started to feel. Dante touched me constantly, a hand on my back, a squeeze of my wrist, a brush of his fingers through my hair. At first, I told myself it was for practice. But after a while, I stopped telling myself anything. I just let him. And I started touching him back. The night of the gala, I stood in front of a full-length mirror in a tailored black suit, my hair styled, my nerves buzzing. Dante appeared behind me, dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo that made him look like a film star. He adjusted my tie, his knuckles grazing my collarbone. "You look beautiful." I looked terrified. That's part of the charm. He turned me to face him, his hands cupping my face. "Stay close to me. Don't talk to anyone without me. If someone makes you uncomfortable, tell me. Understood?" I nodded. He leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. "Good. Let's go." The gala was held at a sprawling estate outside the city, with valets, chandeliers, and enough security to invade a small country. The moment we walked in, every head turned. Dante's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. He leaned down and whispered, "Smile. You're supposed to be in love." I forced a smile. "This is insane. Just follow my lead." For the next 2 hours, I was introduced to a parade of uncles, cousins, and business associates. Dante kept me close, his hand never leaving my lower back. He touched me with a familiarity that made my chest ache, because it felt too real. Halfway through the evening, a tall man with cold eyes approached us. Dante Moretti, Dante's cousin and the one person Dante had warned me about. "Dante," Vincent said, his gaze sliding to me. "I heard you found yourself a little coffee shop boy." I didn't believe it until now. Dante's hand tightened on my back. "Vincent. You're looking well. For a man who lost 2 shipments last month." Vincent's smile faded. "Careful, cousin." "I'm always careful." Dante turned to me, his expression softening. "Noah, this is Vincent. He's family, unfortunately." I extended my hand. "Nice to meet you." Vincent took my hand, his grip too tight. "You have no idea what you're getting into, do you, coffee boy?" Dante stepped forward, his body a wall between us. "Let go of him." For a second, I thought Vincent would push it. But he released my hand and smiled. "Enjoy the party. While you can." He walked away, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Dante turned to me, his eyes fierce. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "He's just intense." Dante cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. "He won't touch you again. I promise." The room seemed to fade. It was just him and me, his eyes searching mine, his hands warm on my skin. I wanted to kiss him. I wanted to run. I wanted to ask him if any of this was real. But before I could, he pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me. "Dance with me," he murmured. I let him lead me onto the dance floor. His hand settled on my waist, his other hand holding mine. We moved slowly, our bodies close. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. "Because I want to." He spun me gently, then pulled me back. "And because you look like you're about to collapse." I laughed, the sound shaky. "I might be." He pressed his forehead to mine. "Then hold on to me." And I did. For the rest of the song, I held on, and he held me, and it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in years. Chapter 6, The First Kiss. We left the gala just after midnight. In the car, Dante loosened his tie and leaned his head back against the seat. His hand rested on the seat between us, his fingers almost touching mine. I stared at them. Then, without thinking, I closed the distance and laced our fingers together. Dante didn't move. He just turned his head, watching me with that unreadable expression. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know." I squeezed his hand. "I wanted to." He looked away, but I saw the faint curve of his lips. "You're dangerous, Noah Callahan." "Me? You're the Mafia boss." He laughed, a real laugh, and it made my heart flip. "That's exactly what I mean." Back at the apartment, I was still buzzing with adrenaline. I kicked off my shoes and went to the window, staring out at the lights of the city. Dante came to stand beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "Did I pass?" I asked. "You were perfect." He turned to face me. "I should let you go now. You're free." The words hit harder than they should have. Free? The gala's over. The contract's fulfilled. He sounded tired. "You can leave tomorrow." I turned to him, my heart pounding. "And what if I don't want to leave?" His eyes widened, just barely. "Noah. I know this started as a deal. But it doesn't feel like a deal anymore." I stepped closer. "Tell me I'm wrong." He didn't. He just stood there, his jaw tight, his hands balled into fists at his sides. I reached up and touched his face. His skin was warm, his stubble rough under my fingers. "Kiss me," I whispered. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his hands came up to cup my face, and he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been holding back for 6 weeks and couldn't anymore. His tongue swept into my mouth, his body pressing me back against the window. I grabbed his shirt and pulled him closer, drowning in him. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his forehead against mine. "Maybe not." I smiled. "But I'm glad it did." He kissed me again, softer this time. "You're not leaving." It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "I'm not." Chapter 7, Danger. The next week was the happiest I'd been in years. We didn't talk about the future. We just existed, making breakfast, watching movies, kissing until we were breathless. Dante still touched me constantly, but now it meant something different. Or maybe it had always meant something and I had been too scared to see it. But peace, in Dante's world, never lasted. I was working a shift at Grindhouse. Dante had reluctantly let me return part-time, when 2 men walked in just before close. They didn't order anything. They just sat in the corner and watched me. My heart started to race. I reached for my phone under the counter and texted Dante. 2 men. Watching me. Scared, ***. His reply came in seconds. "Stay calm. Enzo's outside." "I'm on my way, ***. I forced myself to keep working, wiping down counters, pretending I wasn't terrified. The men didn't move. They just stared. Then the bell rang, and Dante walked in. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the corner table, said something I couldn't hear, and within seconds, the 2 men were on their feet, pale and apologetic. They left without a word. Dante turned to me, his expression cold. "Close the shop. Now." I didn't argue. I locked the door, flipped the sign, and turned to find him already behind me. "What's going on?" I asked. "Vincent." He ran his hands over my arms, checking for injuries. "He's testing me. Seeing how much I care about you." "And how much do you care?" He gripped my shoulders, his eyes burning. "Too much. That's the problem." I stepped into his arms, burying my face in his chest. "I'm okay. I'm okay." He held me tight, his hand cradling the back of my head. "You're never working alone again. Do you understand?" I nodded against him. "Okay. I'm serious, Noah. If something happened to you, I would burn this city to the ground." I believed him. and strangely, that made me feel safer than anything else. Chapter 8, Close Quarters. That night, Dante took me to a safe house outside the city. It was a small cabin in the woods, no neighbors for miles. Enzo and 2 other men stayed in a second cabin nearby. "We'll stay here until I deal with Vincent," Dante said, locking the door behind us. "How long will that take?" He hesitated. "A few days. Maybe a week." I looked around. The cabin was small but warm, a living room, a kitchen, and 1 bedroom. 1 bedroom. "There's only 1 bed," I said. I noticed. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll take the couch." I shook my head. "Don't be stupid. We can share." "Noah, I'm not going to put you in a position where you feel uncomfortable." I walked to him and took his hand. "I feel safest when you're next to me. So stop being noble and get in bed." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he pulled me into his arms. "You're going to be the death of me." That night, we lay in the dark, facing each other. His hand rested on my hip, his thumb tracing small circles through my shirt. "Tell me something real," I whispered. "Like what?" "Anything. Something you've never told anyone." He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I was 19 when my father was killed. Shot in the back by a man he trusted. I found him in his study. There was so much blood." My chest tightened. "Dante." I told myself I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me like that. His hand moved to my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "Then you texted me to drop dead, and I was curious. Then I was annoyed. Then I was something else." "What else?" He leaned in and kissed me, soft and slow. Completely, terrifyingly lost. I kissed him back, and we held each other until the sun came up. Chapter 9, The Truth. We stayed in the cabin for 5 days. 5 days of walking in the woods, cooking dinner together, and sleeping tangled up in each other. It felt like a dream. Which should have been my first warning. On the 6th morning, I was looking for a phone charger in Dante's bag when I found a folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, and a handwritten note. The photographs were of me. Taken before we ever met. The records were from a loan, owed by my brother, Jack, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The note was in Dante's handwriting. Target located. Proceed with contact. The folder slipped from my hands. I heard Dante come in behind me. "Noah, I can explain." I turned, my heart shattering. "You knew me. Before the text. Before the cafe." He didn't deny it. "I was looking for your brother. He stole from me. A lot of money. I thought if I got close to you, I could find him. I felt sick. So all of this, every touch, every kiss, it was a lie." No, he stepped toward me, his hand reaching for me. "In the beginning, yes. But not now. Noah, I love you." I flinched back. Don't say that. It's the truth." His voice cracked. "I fell for you. I didn't mean to, but I did." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "I trusted you. I let you in. And you were using me the whole time." "I was," he admitted. "But I stopped. Weeks ago. I was going to tell you." "When?" I demanded. "When you found my brother. When you got what you needed." "I already got what I needed," he said quietly. "You." I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "Noah, don't leave. It's not safe." "I don't care." I yanked the door open. "I'd rather take my chances with Vincent than spend another second with you." I walked out into the cold, leaving him standing in the cabin, alone. Chapter 10, Taken. I didn't make it to the main road. A black van screeched to a stop beside me, and before I could react, 2 men grabbed me and threw me into the back. A bag went over my head, and the world went dark. When the bag came off, I was tied to a chair in a cold, damp warehouse. Vincent stood in front of me, smiling. "Noah Callahan," he said. "The coffee boy who stole my cousin's heart. How romantic." I glared at him. "Dante will kill you for this. Dante won't find you in time." Vincent crouched in front of me. "But don't worry. I'm not going to kill you yet. First, I need you to tell me everything you know about Dante's operations. The safe houses. The shipments. His weaknesses." "I don't know anything." Vincent sighed. "That's a shame. Because now I have to hurt you." He hit me. Hard. My head snapped to the side, and blood filled my mouth. "Let's try again," Vincent said. "What does Dante care about most?" I spat blood at him. "You're too late. He doesn't care about anything." Vincent laughed. "That's where you're wrong. He cares about you. And that's why you're going to be his end." He hit me again, and this time, I let the darkness take me. Chapter 11, Rescue. I woke to the sound of gunfire. It was distant at first, then closer. Voices shouting. Boots on concrete. Then the door burst open, and there he was. Dante. He looked like a demon, blood on his white shirt, a gun in his hand, eyes wild. The men guarding me went down in seconds, and then he was at my side, cutting the ropes, his hands trembling. "Noah, baby, look at me." He cupped my face, tilting it up. "I'm here. I've got you." I blinked, groggy and in pain. "You came." "Of course I came." He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I couldn't breathe. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should never have let you walk out. I should have told you the truth." I buried my face in his neck, tears running down my face. I was so scared. "I know. I know." He kissed my hair, my forehead, my cheeks. "I'm getting you out of here. But you have to trust me, okay? Can you do that?" I nodded. He helped me to my feet, and we ran. The warehouse was chaos, smoke, shouts, gunshots. Enzo and his men covered our exit. Dante kept one arm around me, shielding me with his body. We made it to the SUV, and he pushed me inside, sliding in after me. The doors slammed, and we sped away. I was shaking, my teeth chattering. Dante wrapped his jacket around me and pulled me onto his lap, his arms locked around me. "I'm sorry," he repeated, over and over. "I love you. I love you. I should have told you sooner." I looked up at him, and despite everything, I believed him. "I love you too," I whispered. He kissed me then, desperate and broken, like he was afraid I would disappear. And I kissed him back, because I was done running. Chapter 12, Recovery. The next few days were a blur of doctors, stitches, and sleep. I had a concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and a face full of bruises. Dante stayed by my side the entire time, refusing to leave even when Enzo insisted he rest. "You need to eat," I murmured, watching him pace the bedroom for the 100th time. He turned to me, his expression haunted. "I need to find Vincent. Enzo will handle it. I should be the one to handle it." He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands curling into fists. "He hurt you. He put his hands on you. He's going to die screaming." I reached out and took his hand. "Hey. Look at me." He did. His eyes were red, exhausted, but still fierce. "I'm okay," I said softly. "I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere." He let out a shaky breath and pulled me into his arms, careful of my ribs. "I thought I lost you." "You didn't." I kissed his shoulder. "You saved me." "I almost didn't." He buried his face in my hair. "When I found out you were taken, I lost my mind. I would have burned the whole city down to find you." "Very romantic," I said, trying to smile. But let's not burn the city. I like the city. He laughed, a wet, broken sound. God, I love you. I pulled back and looked at him. Say it again. I love you. I kissed him, soft and slow. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. He rested his forehead against mine. Noah, about my brother, the debt, I need you to know. I stopped looking for him weeks ago. I found something better. What? He smiled. You. I hit his arm weakly. That was terrible. But true. He kissed my forehead. Get some rest. I'll be here when you wake up. And he was. ## Chapter 13, Reckoning. It took 2 weeks for Enzo to find Vincent. He had fled Chicago, hiding out in a cabin in Michigan, of all places. But Enzo had a long memory and even longer reach. Dante wanted to go alone. I refused to let him. I'm coming with you, I said, standing in front of the door. Noah, it's too dangerous. I've already been kidnapped and beaten. What's one more family reunion? I crossed my arms. Besides, you promised no more secrets. That means no more going off to kill people without telling me. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. You're impossible. And you love me. I do. He kissed me. Fine. But you stay in the car. In the end, I didn't stay in the car. But I also didn't go inside. I stood by the cabin, listening to the muffled voices inside. It didn't take long. 20 minutes, and Dante walked out, his knuckles bloody. Is it done? I asked. It's done. He came to me and let me take his hands. I gave him a choice. Leave the country and never come back, or die tonight. He chose to leave. I looked at him in surprise. You let him live? I wanted to kill him. His voice was low. But every time I thought about it, I saw your face. And I realized, you wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want me to become that. I reached up and cupped his face. I'm proud of you. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. I don't know how to be good, Noah. But with you, I want to try. Then try, I said. That's all I ask. ## Chapter 14, Home. 3 months later, I moved back into the penthouse, permanently this time. It hadn't been a conscious decision. I just stopped going to my old apartment. My clothes were in Dante's closet. My coffee mug was in his cupboard. My toothbrush was next to his. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. One night, we were lying on the couch, my head in his lap, his fingers threading through my hair. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. I have a question, Dante said. Do you remember the text you sent me? The first one? I laughed. I told you to drop dead. How could I forget? He smiled, looking down at me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I reached up and touched his face. Even better than becoming a mafia boss? He kissed my palm. Even better than that. I'm glad, I said. Because for the record, I didn't mean it. I'm very happy you're alive. He laughed, and it was the warmest sound I'd ever heard. I know. He leaned down and kissed me, slow and deep. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. Marry me, he said. I blinked. What? Marry me, Noah Callahan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple, silver, perfect. I know I'm not an easy man. I know my life is dangerous. But I promise you, I will spend every day making you feel safe, and loved, and hopelessly, ridiculously adored. I stared at him, tears welling in my eyes. You're serious. I've never been more serious. He took my hand. Say yes. I laughed, a sob catching in my throat. Yes. Yes, you ridiculous, terrifying man. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me, and for the first time in my life, everything felt exactly right. Epilogue, 1 year later. We got married on a rooftop overlooking Lake Michigan, surrounded by a surprising number of dangerous men in tuxedos. Enzo cried. Paolo made the suits. Even Vincent sent a card from Argentina. Dante burned it, but I saw him smile. I kept my job at the coffee shop, much to Dante's annoyance. He still came in every morning, ordered black coffee, and sat at the counter watching me. Some things never changed. 1 year after the wedding, we were back in the same cafe, late at night, cleaning up. I was wiping down the espresso machine when Dante came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I have a confession, he murmured. Oh no. Another secret? He kissed the back of my neck. Not a secret. Just something I never told you. I turned in his arms. What? He smiled, that same dangerous, beautiful smile I'd seen the first morning he sat across from me. I'm glad you texted the wrong number. I laughed and kissed him. Me too, Dante. Me too. The bell above the door chimed, but neither of us let go. Some things were worth holding on to.